So since we're building this with Vite, I'm going to go ahead and say npm create Vite at latest, and then enter. And then for the project name, I'm going to call it ttt-fm-yt. And then we're going to be using React. And then we want to use with JavaScript with the speedy web compiler. So enter, and that creates our folder. So we're going to say cd into ttt-fm-yt. And then I'm going to say codium.-r, which is going to restart this. So this is our application. And in order to begin, we first need to install our packages, which are in the package.json. So we're going to go ahead and say npm install. And if you're using a different package manager such as npm, make sure you do npm install. And then as that is installing, we also need to install TailwindCSS, because that is what we're going to be using for our styling. So if you go into the TailwindCSS docs, you can say the installation using Vite right here. And then we're going to install this. So just copy this. So I'm going to say npm add and then paste this in. And once again, if you're using npm, then this is the command npm install. But I'm using pnpm, so I'm going to say pnpm add and then enter to install that. And then instead of Vite config, we need to add TailwindCSS. So inside of Vite config.js right here, I'm going to say import TailwindCSS from at TailwindCSS/Vite. And then right here, I'm going to call TailwindCSS like so, and then save that. And then inside our main CSS file, we're going to import this. So copy, and then inside the source folder, and then inside the index.css, we can just place it on top right there. And then we don't need a lot of these styles such as these three, so we can safely remove them. And then we can remove everything below that. So I'm only going to remain with the import right here and then the root. So save that. And then we can go ahead and say pnpm dev to start our dev server on localhost 3000 and localhost 5173. And then when you reload that, then we have our application running right there. And of course, the styling is changed because we're using TailwindCSS. So for this project, I have some pre-prepared CSS so that we can move a bit faster. So you can get this CSS in the link in the description. You can get the entire repository, and you can simply navigate into the source folder and then into the app.css file. Then you can simply select all that, copy, and then inside your app.css, you can simply go ahead and select all that and then paste it in so that it is going to override the styles that you have. Now, this is a premium project from Frontend Mentor, so we don't have access to the SVG files and the images. So what I did was I just put the images into an AI, and then it helped me to generate all this. That's why you can see that even for the cells right here, we have the cell X, which is the XSVG when you select a cell, and then we have the outline when you're hovering over it, and then have the same for the O, and we have the outline right there. So this was all generated using AI, and that is something that I do appreciate because I didn't have to write all of this out. Now you can see that on the body we are using a font family that is called outfit, but we don't have it inside here, and I think we have a font family here. We can remove that. And then what we need to do is we need to navigate into our index.html right here. Once again, this link is going to be in the description, and then you can just simply copy these three links right here, copy, and then inside our index.html we can simply paste them right. Let's paste them right below that, and then let's change the title into Tic Tac Toe, and let's have Frontend Mentor like so. Save that, and then you can also save our CSS, and then once we save it, then it should update our styles, as you can see right there, so that now we can begin building. So I think I can safely close this tab because we no longer need it. And then now we're going to go ahead and begin to build out our application. So we're going to jump into our source folder and then into the app.jsx, and then we're going to remove everything inside here. And then we're simply going to say export default function app. And then inside this app, we're going to have some state values. So we're going to say const game mode and set game mode. So this is going to be toggling whether you want to play with the CPU or you want to play against the player. And the new state by default, it is going to be null, and we need to import this. So control spacebar and then enter to auto import it. And what you're seeing here is ESLint, so it's just going to highlight any variable that you have declared but you have not used. and then we're going to say const player symbol. So whether the player selected either to players X or O, and then set player symbol. This is going to be equal to useState, and by default it is going to be the X, so it's going to be a string, and then we pass in X by default, and then const game started. So const game started and set game started, and for this one we're going to be using this to toggle between the state of whether you're on the setup menu or whether you're in the game. So useState, and by default it is going to be true. Now inside here we're going to be doing quite a bit of things, and we're going to be importing a bit of stuff also. So let's just go ahead and return a div here that says Tic Tac Toe. And type of that, let's say just say TTT, and then save that, and then on the screen we should have that. Okay, now let's go ahead and begin to deal with our imports, because we need to build out a lot of logic first before you can continue building out the app. So I'm going to say import GameBoard, which is a component. So import GameBoard from /components /GameBoard, which you don't yet have. Then copy this 2 more times. This is going to be the GameSetup component, and then this is going to be the Win model. So this is going to be importing the Win model. This is going to be importing the GameSetup. And then let's go ahead and create the components folder. So inside the source folder, create a new file called components/gameboard.jsx, which is going to create the folder called components and then the file called GameBoard. Let's say RFC inside here, and then just save it. And RFC is coming from an extension that I have that is called ES7 plus React Redux and React Native Snippets. So you can simply go ahead and do a command like RAFCE, for example, which is create the arrow function component, or you can say RFC, which is going to create this. And then if you're in React Native, you can say RNF, which is going to create the React Native function for you. So RFC to generate that. And then let's also go ahead and create the component, so new file that is called GameSetup.jsx, and then say RFC once again, and then create another component that is called WinModel.jsx, and then RFC once again, and save that. So now when we are importing this, then they should be working. Now apart from this, we're also going to need to build out our logic. Now our logic is going to be extracted into custom hooks. So inside the source folder, create a new file called hooks/useLocalStorage. We're going to need that one first of all. So useLocalStorage.js, because I mean we can need JSX also, it should still work. And then we're also going to create another one called useGameLogic. So useGameLogic.jsx, and then we can go ahead and begin to build out the local storage first, because local storage is easier than the game logic. So inside useLocalStorage, we're going to say import useState from React, and then I'm going to say export const useLocalStorage. So we're exporting it as a named export. So when we're importing it, we need to import it inside curly brackets to show that it is a named import. So we're going to pass in the key here, which is going to be accessing local storage, and then the initial value, which is going to show the initial value in case we don't have anything in local storage. And then we're going to say const stored value, and set stored value is going to be equal to useState. And then inside here, we're going to pass in an function like so, and then we're going to build out our logic. So we're going to have a try catch block, and for the catch we're going to say console.error, and then we're going to pass in an error here that is going to say error reading from local storage, and then comma, and then pass in the error so that we can read what the error says. And then we're simply going to return the initial value, because once again, if this happens, then it means that probably there is an issue with local storage, so we want to return the initial value of the application. So in the try block, we're going to say this const item is equal to window.localStorage, and then .get item, and then we want to get the item that is called the key, which we have just passed in. And then we're going to return, we want to check if item is true, and if that is true, we're going to say json.parse, and then we're going to pass in the item which we have just got right here, and then otherwise we're going to return the initial value like so. And then below this right here, so right before the closing curly bracket right here, we can go ahead and create another function here called const set value, and inside here we're going to pass in the value as a parameter, and we're going to open up our block of code like so. We're going to have another try catch block, and then for the catch we're going to say console.error, and then let's say error setting local storage key, and then we're going to go ahead and pass in the error, as well like so. And you know what, we can pass in the key here, the variable called key. So change this into backticks, link this into backticks so that you can read this, so that we know which key has a problem, and then we're going to pass in the error so that we can read the error as well. And for the console here, we're not going to be returning the initial value, but in the try block we're going to say const value to store is equal to, so which value do you want to store? So value instance of, and we're going to pass in the function here, and if this is true, then the value we're going to pass in the stored value, and then otherwise we're just going to return the normal value. And then we're going to say set stored value into the value to store, and then we're going to say window, so window.localStorage.set item, and then we're going to pass in the key rather, and then we're going to say json.stringify, and then we're going to stringify the value to store. So what happens here is that we are accessing local storage, and then we're checking for the key, and then we're updating its value into the value that we are extracting from this. And I think that is the set value. And then now below this, so right before the closing curly bracket, we're going to go ahead and return the stored value and then the set value like so. And that is our use local storage hook. Now we can save that, but we can't really test it yet. But we now need to go ahead and build out the use game logic, which is much larger. And let's begin by importing use state and then use effect as well. And then we need to import use local storage, which we have just built, and then we need to import the use callback hook as well. Why didn't I do it here? So use callback, and then we're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to define some winning combinations, because in Tic Tac Toe you can win when you have rows and columns and diagonals as well. So we're going to define those in a matrix form. So const winning underscore combinations is equal to, and this is going to be an array of arrays. So you can either win with the first one or the second one or the third one. And let me show you what I mean. If I were to test out the application, and I can't really test it out, but what is basically happening is we are defining the rows first of all, the rows that are going to be the winning combination. So if you have if you are the X player and you have the X on the first cell, the second cell, and the third cell, then you're the winner. And then we're going to be defining some other values for the rows, and then other values for the columns, and then for the diagonals as well. So let's go ahead and define that. So this is the first winning combination. So outside of this, comma, and then we want to check for cell number 3, 4, and 5, which is basically cell number 4, 5, and 6, because it is an array and arrays are 0 based. And then we want to check for number 6, 7, and 8, which is basically 7, 8, and 9. So these right here are the rows which define the winning combination. Now we want to go ahead and define the columns as well. So this is going to be 0, 3, 6, comma, and then we have 1, 4, and 7, and then comma, and then we have 2, 5, and 8, 2, 5, and then 8. So these are the columns that define a winning combination. And then we have the diagonals, which are 0, 4, and 8, comma, and then 2 and 4 and 6. I think I'll be able to explain this better when we have something on the screen, but now these right here are the diagonals. Now be careful, because if I save this, it's going to format it. So I purposefully did it like this so that you can see it better. Now let's go ahead and do this. We're going to say export const use game logic like so, and then use game logic is going to be an arrow function like this, but it is going to be taking a few things. So it's going to take in the game mode, as well as the player symbol. So player symbol, which if you remember we defined in our app right here. So use game mode and the player symbol, and then we're going to go ahead and do this const board and set board is equal to use state and not use state, sorry, but use local storage. And inside use local storage, we want to go ahead and pass in the key, right, which is we're going to call Tic Tac Toe dashboard. And then the value that we want to pass is we want to create an array here of 9 items because that is the Tic Tac Toe board, so it has 9 items. And then dot fill, then pass in null, so it's going to be empty. And then we're going to say const current player set current player is equal to use local storage, and then want to pass in tic dash tac dash toe dash player, so tic tac toe player, and then the default value is going to be x. And then const, now we can separate this because now these are the our state values. So const winner and set winner equal to type use state. By default it is going to be now, so there's not going to be a winner by default. Copy this 2 more times. This is now going to say set winning line, so that it checks for this, and then winning line, and by default it is also going to be null. And then this is going to say set game status, and then game status, and then by default we're going to be playing the game, so that is going to be the default. So the game status is either going to be playing, or it is a win, or it is a tie. So this is the state value that is going to be checking for that. And then I'm going to say const CPU symbol is going to be equal to player symbol. So I want to check if the player symbol is equal to x. If that is true, then the CPU symbol is an O, and otherwise then the CPU symbol is an X. So basically you're saying that for the CPU symbol, we want to check the player symbol. If the player symbol is an X, then assign the CPU symbol to be an O. And if this is not true, then it means that the player symbol is an O, therefore assign the CPU symbol to be an X. So now we're going to create our function here inside a use effect, which is going to be checking for the winner. So use effect, and then inside the use effect, let's return an array here. And inside here, we're going to check for the winner. So const check winner. So const check winner is going to be an arrow function like so. And then we're going to have a for loop here. So for let combination of winning combinations, which we have defined on top. And then inside here, we're going to say const a comma b comma c, which is basically the same structure as each of this. Const abc is equal to combination, like so. Now we're going to have an if statement here. So if board, and then pass in a, which we've defined on top, and board again pass in b, pass in a, and check if this is equal to the board, and then pass in b, and then again ampersand, checking the board of a is equal to the board, and then pass in c. Now if that is true, then we're going to say set winner into into the board, and then pass in the a, and then set winning line into the combination. So, and then once we do that, then we're going to say set game status into the 1, because it means that the person has won. And then we're going to return so that we can break out of that. And then we're going to count 1, 2. So we're going to go outside of this, and then we're going to say this. We want to check for a tie. So if it is a tie, we want to check if the board, if every cell has been filled. So you can do that using board.every, then pass in the cell like so. And then we want to check if every cell is not equal to null, meaning it has been filled, but a winning combination has not been gotten, then it means that it is a tie. So you're going to say set game status into tie, and then return so that we can break out of that. And then below this, we want to go ahead and say set winner into null, then set winning line into null, so basically resetting everything, and then set game status into playing like so. And then below this, we can now call our function called check winner, and then for the dependency array, we're going to pass in the board like so. And then we want to go ahead and create a function here called make move. So const make move. This is basically for toggling between who is playing. So we're going to pass in the use callback here so that it can memorize this function, so that it is not going to be called on every render. So instead we're going to pass in the index, and then we're going to say if the board index is not equal to null, or the game status is not equal to playing, then we're going to simply go ahead and say return, and then we're going to say const new board is equal to spread in all the default values, or rather the previous values of the board, like so. And then we're going to say new board, pass in the index like so, is equal to current player, and then we're going to say set board into the new board, and then set current player, and we want to check the current player. If the current player is an X, if this is true, then pass in the O, and then otherwise pass in the X, which is basically the same logic as this right here, except that this one now is if you're playing against a player. Now the dependencies array for the use callback are going to be the board, the game status, the current player, the set board, and then the set current player, like so. And then for this one now, we're going to be building the AI moves. Now the AI right here, we're going to call our use effect, and inside our use effect we want to check if the game mode is equal to solo and the current player is equal to the CPU symbol, if that is true, and the game status is equal to play. So playing, not paying, playing. So basically what we're saying is we want to check if the game status is in a solo, so basically playing against the CPU, and then the current player is also equal to the CPU symbol, so if he is playing against the CPU, and then if the game status is playing, so if they have started the game. Now we're going to go ahead and do this. We want to add in a timer here, so const timer is equal to set timeout, then pass in our function like so, and then we're going to say const best move is equal to get best move, and pass in the board, and then the CPU symbol, and then the player symbol. Now we don't have this function yet, but we're going to create it. That's why it's giving me this kind of ellipsis right there. And then we're going to check if the best move is not equal to -1, meaning it is not the last one. Then we're going to say this. We're going to say make move, and then pass in the best move. And what am I doing here? This should be wait a minute, should not have that. That's better. And then the set timer right here, we're going to have a delay here of 500, which is 0.5 seconds, so that it can just build, like it can give you a sense like the computer is thinking. So that's basically what is happening there. And then below this, we're going to go ahead and clean up our function. So return clear timeout, and then pass in the timer like so. And then for the dependency arrays, comma, we're going to have current player, the game mode, the game status, and then the board, and then the CPU symbol, and then the player symbol, and then the make move, and this should be CPU symbol. Fantastic. Now next, we're going to create a function here to reset the game. So const reset game, and we're going to have our arrow function here. We're going to say const new board is equal to array, so create a new board. So array, pass in 9 because we want to create 9 items, dot fill, and then fill them with nothing so that it just shows an empty board. And then we're going to say set board into new board, and then set current player into X, and then set winner into null, and then set winning line into null again, and then set game status into playing because we are simply resetting the game. And then we're going to have a function here to restart the game. So const restart game is equal to passing an arrow function like so, and then we want to check if window.confirm, are you sure you want to restart game? So it's basically going to bring down a prompt right here. because I did not build a dialog for it. So if that is true, then we want to go ahead and say reset game. So reset game function that we have built right on top. And then finally, outside of this now, out of our hook, we're going to be returning the board, current player, the winner, the winning line, the game status, as well as the game status, and then make move function, and then reset game function, and then restart game function. And then now once we have that, now we need to go ahead and build out this function. So where this ends, so you can simply shrink that and you can know that it ends right here. So outside of that, then we are going to go ahead and say const get best move, and inside here we're going to pass in the board and then the AI symbol and then the human symbol as well. So human symbol, and then this is an arrow function. Now what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and copy paste, because for this part I used AI because it uses what is called a minimax algorithm with alpha beta pruning. Now I don't know things about algorithms, so I will not be able to explain this part well enough so that you'll be able to understand. So what I'm going to do is I want to go ahead and copy it from my repository, which I closed, but I can simply reopen it. Now it should be inside the source folder, and then inside the hooks, and then inside the useGameLogic. So if I go ahead right to the bottom, and it's quite a huge block. So right here, so AI implementation using the minimax algorithm with alpha beta pruning. So I can just simply go ahead and copy that. So I can try to explain it right here, but I'll not be able to explain every single line of code. So what is happening is that it is checking for the available moves on the board. So if it is empty, then it has all the cells available. And then what is happening is after we map over the cells and then we filter the ones that are not null, then it remains with the remaining available moves. And then it's checking that if the available moves is equal to 0, then it means that the entire board is filled, so return -1. And then it is checking for the first move. So if it is the X player, then usually the best move to take is the center or the corner. So that is what is happening inside here. And then it is checking for if it can win immediately. So basically it's saying that if the AI can win immediately, then it should win immediately. I've said AI, but I really mean CPU. So if it can win immediately, then it is going to win immediately. So that's this part right here. And then it is going to check that if the other person has a chance of winning, then block the chance of winning. And then it uses the minimax right here for the optimal move. And then it uses this is where the minimax is defined. So this is the function after calling it right there. And then I noticed that I misspelled this. This is winning combinations, and I misspelled it here. So combination. So simply highlight that and then say Control D so that you get all instances of it, so that you can simply combinations, add an I right there, capital I, and then it should be able to correct one. There we go. So that is our useGameLogic. Now if I save that, you can see that it is going to format it for me. And then now I think we should be ready to jump back into our app and we can begin building. So our app right here, we have our state values. Let's go ahead and add in our scores. So const scores and set scores is equal to useLocalStorage. And then inside here, we're going to pass in the key as ttt-scores, so Tic Tac Toe -scores. And then we're going to pass in the X is going to be 0 by default. And then the O is going to be 0 by default. And then the ties are going to be 0 by default. And then outside of this, we're going to go ahead and extract some values from useGameLogic. So we're going to extract the board, and then the current player, and then the winner, and then winning line, and then game status, and then the make move function, and then the reset game, and then restart game. And this is coming from useGameLogic. And then we're going to pass in the game mode as well as the player symbol, because remember that useGameLogic right here is going to be taking in the game mode and then the player symbol, which we're getting from here right there. Now once we do that, we're going to create a function here called handle game setup. And handle game setup is going to take in the mode as well as the symbol, and it's an arrow function where we're going to say set game mode into the mode that we have as a parameter, and then set player symbol and type set player symbol into the symbol that we have as our parameter, so we're going to be passing it in, and then set game started, set this into true. So remember that game started is a boolean, it can either be true or false, so we're setting it here into true. Now below this we're going to have another function called handle win model action. So whether or not to show the winner model, it's going to be taking the action as a parameter. We're going to say this: if the action is equal to next, meaning if we click on the next button, then we're going to show the next game. If that is true, then we want to go ahead and update the scores first of all. So if winner, then we're going to say set scores into the previous value of the scores, and then we're going to go ahead and open this up like so. We're going to take in the previous values, and then we want to go ahead and change the winner like so, and then pass in the previous values of the winner, and then add 1 because he has increased the wins. And then right here we're going to say else if the game status is equal to a tie, then we want to increase the number of the ties. So we're going to say set scores into the previous value of the scores, and then we're going to open this up once again. We're going to pass in the previous values, and then the ties are going to be previous.ties, and then add 1 to the ties. So, and then once we go, this should be ... so 3 of them. And then now we can go outside of, so we can go outside of this, where we're going to say reset game. And then still within this if, we now have an else if here. So else if the action is equal to quit. So if you have quit the game, then we're going to say set game started into false, so turn it back to false. Set game mode into now, which is its default value, and then we're going to call reset game once again. Now outside of this, we're going to have a function here called handle restart, which is going to be restart game like so. And then if no game started, so if no game started, then we simply want to go ahead and return here the component that is called GameSetup like so. And GameSetup is going to be taking a prop called onGameSetup, and we're going to be passing in the handle GameSetup function, which we have created on top right here. Okay, now that we have that, then we can begin to build out our return, and we have not yet built out the game setup as well, but don't worry about that. So inside the return, we're going to have a class name here of min height dash screen, and then bg dash primary dash dark. Now this is coming from our CSS, should be inside the app.css. So bg primary dark, which we copied and pasted in the beginning, and then the font is going to be outfit, font dash outfit. Once again, this is a custom class that we've created, and then flex, and then item dash center, and then justify dash center. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of container, and then mx auto, so that it centers everything, padding on the x of 4, padding on the y of 8, and then max width dash md. Now this is coming from an extension that I have, and it comes pre-installed with the Visual Studio Code that is called emmet. So you can do ... you can chain most of them so that it creates a div with a class name of container. Now inside here, we're going to be passing in the GameBoard component, and the GameBoard component is going to be taking quite a bit of props. So it's going to take in the board prop equal to the board. The current player is going to be equal to the current player. And then on cell click, so when you click on a cell, it's going to be taking in the make move function. And then on restart, we're going to be calling the handle restart function. So handle restart. And then the game mode, we're going to be taking in the game mode right there. And then the player symbol is going to be equal to the player symbol right there. And then the scores is going to be equal to the scores, and then the winning line is going to be equal to the winning line. Now if I save that, then it's going to format it much better, and I think I should have done this instead because it would be easier to see. Now below this, we want to go ahead and check if the winner or the game status is equal to a tie. Now if that is true, so double ampersand, then we want to go ahead and show our win model. So the win model is going to be taking some props as well, so let me do that here. So the winner is going to be equal to the winner, and then the game status is going to be equal to the game status, and then the game mode is going to be equal to the game mode, and then the player symbol is going to be equal to the player symbol, and then on action is going to be calling a function here that is called handle win model action that we also created. Now I can save that, and you should see on the screen we should now have the game board right there. So let's go ahead and build our game board next. So we're going to jump into the components and then into the game board, and for our game board we're going to remove the React import, but we're going to import use state. And then remember that this takes in quite a bit of props, which we are going to destructure. So the board, the current player, the on cell click, and make sure that you name them exactly the way you named them in the props, and then on restart, and then game mode, and then player symbol, and then the scores, and then the winning line. Now once you have that, then you can create our state value. So const hovered cell and set hovered cell. This is just for the animation. This is going to be equal to use state. By default it is going to be null, and then we're going to create a function here called handle cell click, and we're going to be accessing the index here as a parameter, where we're going to say if the board and then pass in the index is equal to null, then we want to call the function called on cell click and then pass in the index, because what is happening is that it's checking for whether the cell that you're on is equal to null, and if it is equal to null, then it means that there's nothing on that cell. So we're going to call the function to add something in that cell, so either X or O depending on the player symbol. And then below this we're going to have const handle cell hover. I'm going to pass in the index, and then this is going to say if board and then pass in the index as well is going to be equal to null, then set hovered cell into the index that we're on. So basically add the kind of hover, and then const handle can type cell leave, and then this is not going to be taking anything. It's going to be an arrow function. Then we're going to say const or the set hovered cell back into null, and then we're going to have a function here to dynamically add styles. So const get cell class is going to be equal to the index, or that not equal to the index, sorry, but it's going to be having the index as a parameter. And then we're going to say let base class, so the base classes of the cells are going to be as follows. So width dash full, aspect dash square, pg dash primary dash light, rounded dash 2xl, cursor dash pointer, transition dash all, duration and type duration dash 200, and then on hover we're going to have shadow dash large, and then transform, and then on hover we're going to say scale to 105, and then flex, and then items dash center, justify dash center. And also take note that if you have any typo inside here, please fix it, otherwise these classes some of them are not going to apply, or the class name that you have the typo on is not going to apply. And then we're going to say if the winning line and the winning line dot includes the index, then we're going to say the base class plus equals to the board, and then pass in the index, and then this is equal to x. We want to check if it is equal to x. If it is true, then once say bg primary dash teal, and then otherwise bg dash primary dash orange. So basically what is happening is we're checking if, why is this not applying? Okay, so what is happening inside here is that we are checking if the winning line and the winning line also contains the index that we have inside here, and if that is true, then we want to attach all the classes of the base class, and then we want to check if the winner is an X. So if the winner is the X symbol, then the class names are going to be bg primary teal, which is going to show the teal color, and then otherwise it's going to be the orange, meaning it is an O, and then bg primary orange. Now we're going to go below this. I was going to say if the board, and then pass in the index once again. If that is true, then we're going to say the base class, we're going to attach the base class, and then plus equals to, and then pass in the board, and then once again the index. And if this is equal to X, if that is true, then we want to attach the class name, so space first of all, and then cell dash X. Now we're adding a space so that it adds a class name instead of attaching it. If we did not have a space, then it would attach the class name here like cell X, and you'd see that that would be a problem. So we are adding in a space here, and then we're saying cell X, and then otherwise another space, and then cell dash O. And then we're going to have an else if here, so else if the hovered cell is equal to the index, and if that is true, then we want to have in the classes of the base class, and then plus equals to, we want to check the current player. If the current player is equal to an X, if that is true, then we're going to have a space once again where we're going to call cell dash X dash outline class, and then otherwise add a space cell dash O dash outline. And then outside of this, we want to check if the board, then pass in the index once again, is not equal to null, then the base class plus equals to space cursor dash default. Now outside of this, we're going to go ahead and say return base class. So now we should no longer have that error. Fantastic. And then outside of this function, we're going to create another function which is going to be the final one for this. So get player label is going to be passing in the symbol, and then we're going to say if the game mode is equal to solo, then we're going to check if the symbol is also equal to the player symbol, and if that is true, then we're going to say return u. And what have I done? This should be curly bracket, so return u, else then we're going to say return CPU. And then outside of this, we're going to return a default that says player. What is happening here? I'm missing a bracket, is it? What bracket am I missing? What bracket am I missing? This is here. Oh, that should be it. Move this upwards, move this upwards, and then move this here, remove that. Oh my god, what's happening? Okay, undo. Let's just undo that. Okay, so if the game mode is equal to solo, and then we want to check if the symbol is also equal to the player symbol, and if that is true, then return u, not your, but u. And then I've done the same mistake again. Okay, and then else return CPU. So, and then 1, 2, and then outside of that, we're going to say return player, like so. Now we can save that so that it formats it properly, but we still have GameBoard on the screen because we've not built out any UI. So let's go ahead and begin to do that. So this div right here is going to have a class name of animate-fade-in, which is a custom class that we have. And then we're going to have a div with a class name of flex, and then justify-between, and then items-center, and then margin bottom of 6. And then inside here, we're going to have another div with a class name of flex, and then items-center, and then space-x-2. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of size-8, so width and height of 8, and then a class name of cell-x. which is that should be the end of that div. And then we're going to have another div here with the class name of size-8, and then cell-o, like so. And then let's see, we should go, this is a self-closing div. So outside of this div, we're going to have another div with the class name of bg-primary light with a class name of padding on the x of 4, and then padding on the y of 2, and then rounded-xl, and then flex items-center, and then space on the x of 2. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div. Now this is going to have some dynamic class name. So class name here is going to be equal to curly bracket, and then open up your backticks. So size-12, so width and height of 12. And then we're going to check for the $ curly bracket. We want to check if the current player is equal to x. Now if that is true, then we want to attach the class name of cell-x, otherwise cell-o. And then that div closes itself like that. And then we're going to have a span here with the class name of text-primary silver, and then text-small, and then font-bold, and then tracking wide. And then inside here, we're going to say to play. So if I save that, then it should have something on the screen. So basically like that. So X to play. And then below this div, we're going to have a button which is going to be our restart button. So button here, which is going to say restart. Let's save that. It should be right there. So we're going to style out this button. So this button is going to have a class name here. I think it's better just to do this. Place it like so. Fantastic. Then let's close the sidebar so that we can work on that. So restart. So this button is going to have a class name of bg-primary-silver, and then it's going to have an opacity of 80, and then it's going to have a padding on the y of 2, padding on the x of 4, and then rounded-xl, the flex items-center, justify-center, transition-all, duration-200, and then transform, and then on hover scale it to 105. So let's save that. That is our button, bg primary silver. Oops, okay, that doesn't work. I thought it would work, but it doesn't. And then we're going to go below this button and below that div, where now we're going to build our grid. So we're going to have a div here, the class name of grid, and grid-columns-3, and then gap of 4, and then margin bottom of 6. And then inside here, we're going to say board.map. And then for every cell that we're going to get back, we also want to get back the index of that cell, where we are now going to return a div here with a key of index, close it out. And then this div is going to have a class name here of get cell class, and then pass in the index, because that is what we're using inside this function that is right there. So using the index to apply all these classes. And then on click, so when we click on this, so on click, we're going to be calling an inline function here called handle cell click, and then we're going to pass in the index. And then on mouse enter, so on mouse enter, we're going to be calling an inline function once again called handle cell hover, not cell click but cell hover, and then we're going to pass in the index. And then on mouse leave, which is another event, we're going to be calling an inline function called handle cell leave, like so, and then pass in sorry, this doesn't get taken any index. And then inside here, we're going to have a div with a class name of size-4, and then animate-scale-in, and that is our self-closing div. And if you save that, then we should now have our grid. But something is wrong. This should be map single p. And there we go. So we have our grid. You can see that when we map over it, then it shows the current player, which is an X, and then it says that O to play, but that should not be the case. And you can see that we can click on them right there. So the game is finished, but we don't have our win model yet. So let's go ahead and handle that. We are not handling it yet, but we're going to handle it also. So below this, we're going to show our scoreboard. So we're going to have a div with the class name of grid, and then grid-columns-3, and then gap of 4, And then inside this div, we're going to have a div with a class of bg-primary, primary-till, rounded-2xl, and then padding all round of 4, and then text-center. And then inside this div, we're going to have another div called text-primary-dark, text-small, font-bold, and then margin bottom of 1. And then inside here, we're going to render x, and then we're going to pass in get player label, and then pass in the x. And then outside of this div, we're going to have another div with the class name of text-primary-dark, text-2xl, and then font-bold. And then inside here, we're going to pass in the scores.x, so meaning the scores of the x or of the player x. And then outside of this div, and then also outside of this second div, we're going to have a class name of bg-primary-dark, and then text-small, and then font-bold, margin bottom of 1, and this is going to say ties. And then we're going to go outside of this div that says ties. We're going to have another div, the class name of text-primary-dark, text-2xl, and then font-bold, and then this is going to say the scores.ties, so that we get the ties. And then we're going to go below these two divs. We're going to have another div with the class name of bg-primary-orange, and then rounded-2xl, then padding all around of 4, and then text-center. And then we're going to say div with the class name of text-primary-dark, text-sm, font-bold, margin bottom of 1. And then we're going to get the O player, and then pass in the get player label. And then we're going to pass in the O, because now that is the O. And you know what, this should be inside parentheses like so, and we should do the same thing, parentheses, okay. And then outside of this div, we're going to have another div with the class name of text-primary-dark, text-2xl, and then font-bold. And then this is going to say the scores.o to get the scores of the O player. So if you save that, then you should see it right there. But I've messed up the styles. Yes, I've messed up the styles. So where is the... So this div should be inside here. Save that. Okay. So let me just confirm these classes because I've messed up somewhere. So grid columns -3, then gap of 4, bg-primary-till, rounded-2xl. Where does this div end? This div ends there. So it just seems like I've messed up the grid somewhere. So div 1, div number 2. Okay, so this is one div, there's a second div, so this div should not be here. And you know what, I'm missing one div, so sorry about that. So bg-primary-silver, and then rounded-2xl, and then padding all around the 4, and then text-center. And then now inside this, we can now paste in the div for our ties and then our scores. That's what I was missing. And then this should be text primary instead of bg primary, so that it doesn't show that. Okay, fantastic. Now this is coming from the games that I've already played. That's why it's this, but it should be 000 for you. And it's also getting these values because this is what I have in local storage. Okay, so this is our game board complete. So next, let's go ahead and add our winners model. So back inside here, let's go ahead into the win model so that it actually shows who has won the game. So inside here, we're going to have, we can remove that import, but we know that we have some props inside here which are going to destructure. So destructure the winner, the game status, the game mode, the player symbol, and then on action function. So on action. So, and then inside here, we're going to have a function which is called get winner text, and this is going to be an arrow function. we're going to say that if the game status is equal to a tie, then the text is going to say return round tied. And then below this, if the game mode is equal to a solo, and then we want to check if the winner is equal to the player symbol, then return the text that says you won. And then else we want to say return, oh no, you lost, ... And then outside of this, we're going to say else return player 1 wins, because it means that now the winner is the CPU, so player 1 wins. Now outside of this, we're going to go ahead and call another function called get subtext, and inside here it's going to be an arrow function. Once again, we're going to say that if the game status is equal to a tie, then we want to go ahead and return nothing. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and return takes the round. So basically what's happening is that the subtext here is it's going to check whether you are the X player or the O player, and then it's just going to say X takes the round or O takes the round. And then below this, we're going to have another function called get winner color. This is going to be an arrow function. We're going to check if the game status is equal to a tie, and if that is true, then we're going to return text-primary-silver for the tie. Otherwise, we're going to return, we want to check if the winner is equal to the X, and if that is true, then we're going to return text-primary-teal, and then otherwise text-primary-orange. And then another function is called get winner icon. This is going to be as follows. You want to check if the game status is equal to a tie, and if it is a tie, then we want to return null because there is not yet a winner. And then otherwise, we're going to return a div here. Return a div, and then this div is going to have some dynamic class names here, and it is going to be self-closing. So this div, we want to add the size -a, so width and height of 8, margin right of 4, and then $sign, we're going to say winner is equal to X. If that is true, then the class name we want to have is cell-x. Otherwise, we want to have cell-o, so that it shows the complete cell, or that the complete like icon here instead of the outline. Now inside here, we're going to be returning a div here with a class name of fixed, because the winner's model is going to be appearing over everything. So fixed insert -0, and then bg-black with an opacity of 50, and then flex items-center, justify-center, and then a z-index of 50 so that it appears over everything else, and then animate-fade-in, which is one of our custom classes. Now inside this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of bg-primary-light, and then rounded-2xl, and then padding all round of 8, and then max width-small, and then width-full, and then mx-4, and then animate-slide-up, which is another one of our custom classes. And then inside this, we're going to have a class name of text-center, or a div with a class name of text-center, and I've just noticed a typo here, so animate. And then inside this div, we want to check if the game mode is equal to solo, and the game status is not equal to a tie. And if that is true, then we're going to be returning here a paragraph, and this paragraph is going to have a class name here of text-primary-silver, text-sm, font-bold, and then margin bottom of 2, then tracking-wide, and then the text for the paragraph is going to be calling the get winner text. So get winner text, like so. Now below this, we're going to have another div with a class name of flex items-center, justify-center, margin bottom of 6, and then this is going to say get winner icon, like so. And then still within this div, we're going to have another div, and then this div is going to have an h2 with some dynamic class names. So class name here, and we're going to say text dash 2xl, font dash bold, and then $, we're going to have get winner color, call that function, and then add in tracking dash wide. And then inside here, we're going to check if the game status is equal to a tie, and if this is true, then we're going to call the function called get winner text, like so. What am I missing here? Oh, it's the column. Otherwise, we want to just render out the winner. Now below the h2, we're going to have get subtext. Now if get subtext is true, meaning if it exists, because we know that in the get subtext right here, if it is a tie, then we're not returning anything. So basically, if this exists, then we're going to render out a paragraph here, a paragraph with some dynamic class names. So class name is equal to text dash large, font dash bold, and then $ curly bracket, we're going to get winner color, and then we're going to attach tracking dash wide at the end of it. And then inside you're going to say get subtext, like so, call it as a function. And then we're going to go, actually, let's see, we're going to go below one div, two div. So below this, we're going to have another div with a class name of flex, and then space on the x of 4. And we're going to have a button here. This button is going to say quit, and then we'll copy it down. This other button is going to say next round. And when you click on the quit button, so on click, we're going to be calling a function here, an inline function called onAction, where we're going to call the function that is called quit, because if you remember when we were defining our game logic, we were checking for the quit or the next. So obviously for this next button, we're going to be calling in onAction, but then we're going to be calling in next. Now let's go ahead and style both of these buttons. So right at the end here, you can click on this and then hold down the Alt key, and then click on this next one so that you can have two cursors so that we can style both of them. Now they have most of the same styles, but the only difference is the colors. So flex-1, bg-primary silver. Now silver is for the top one, but the bottom one is orange, so we're going to change that. And then text-primary dark, and then font-bold, padding on the y of 3, padding on the x of 6, rounded -xl, transition all with a duration of 200, and then transform, and then on hover we're going to say scale to 105. So scale -105. Now simply change this to orange, and those should be our two buttons. So if I save that, we should be able to see our winners model. What is this? This should be a tie like so inside as a string. So tie like so. Okay, now let's reload, and of course it breaks. Of course. So I just attempted to restart, and then I noticed that we did not have our function on the restart button right here. So inside GameBoard and then on the restart, we're going to have an on click right here on the button. So on click, we're going to be calling the on restart function. So save that, and it broke. So is this even okay? So something is wrong with the application. Let's open up DevTools. What's happening? It's showing nothing. That's annoying. That's quite annoying. So what's the problem here? There's no problem. There is no problem. Is it even filling up anything? Okay. So you can see that our model is working. Our model is working. I just attempted to fill in the what's it called? The cells, and you can still have the quit and next. So if I say quit, it should say game setup, which means that, let's see, if I reload and then just try to fill up the cells randomly, is there anything that is left? Oh, it's not going to be filled because now we have to set up the game. So why is it broken? Why is it broken? Okay, I just noticed something else in the app.jsx. We have the restart game function right here, but in the handle restart we're calling reset game. That should not be it. It should say restart game. Restart game, so that now this should now work. Okay, so are you sure you want to restart? Okay. And actually, is that what I wanted? That is not what I wanted, because now we need to actually build out the logic for the game setup. We need to build out the logic, otherwise we're going to be stuck here forever. But I wonder why this is now not showing. That should not be the case. Let me try and just figure out the problem. And actually, let me go ahead and also clear out the local storage. So application, local storage right here, Tic Tac Toe. Let's delete all this. We don't need all of this. So delete that, delete that, delete. So that now when I restore that, when I refresh it, it should refresh with the 000. Okay. So I'm still looking through all this code and I noticed some typos here. So I added 3 triple L's there. It should be justified as center. Let's change this to dark. Does it apply? Okay, so our CSS is not applying at all. Our CSS is not applying. Did I remove something here? Oh, we're not importing the app CSS. We are not importing, so import./app.css. Why was that so hard to find? That took like 10 minutes to find. Anyway, so X to play, we have this applying. We have our win model. Our win model is also applying. Let's take this back there. Let's see. If we restart the game, restart. Okay, so restart button works, and then we can play this, 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 and our win model should now pop up, but it's not. That's annoying. That's annoying. What do we have in the app.jsx? Don't have the logic for that. If winner or the game started is not equal to a tie, or that is equal to a tie, win model and you know what, this should not be game started, it should be game status. The tie or the win or the playing is stored in the game status. So there we go. So round tied, and then quit, and then next round. So if you go to next round, it resets the board. You can play again, and then takes the round. What is this styling? Win model. Takes the round. Text the round is on the subtext, right? Subtext, or where's the subtext? So here, guess subtext is true. To XL. Save that to XL. Winner text round. Do we need this? I'm starting to rethink that. We don't need this. We do not need this. But the H2, we do need the H2 because of the colors, right? Oh, we don't need the H2. What am I doing? We don't need the H2. Okay, so you can only have that text round. Next round, let's actually try to win this. So X text around. Okay, fantastic. Now when I click on quit, it should show the game setup component, which we are going to handle next. Let's close all of this. So into the game setup component. So the game setup is going to be fairly simple because it is more of UI. So we're going to import useState first of all from React, and then we're going to go ahead and destructure some props inside here, or the one prop really, but on game setup. Because if you take a look at the app.jsx, the game setup right here only takes in this prop. So we're going to go ahead and say const selected symbol, because this is where you can select to be either X or O, and then set selected symbol. This is going to be equal to useState, and by default it is going to be X that is selected. And then we're going to call a function here called handle start. So const handle start is equal to, we're going to be taking in the mode as a parameter, and then we're going to call on GameSetup function. We're going to pass in the mode as well as the selected symbol, because this function right here on GameSetup, the handle GameSetup rather, takes in the mode and then the symbol, and then sets the state values, which then populates our game. So that is the only function that we're going to need inside here. The rest of it is UI. So we're going to have a class name here of min-height screen, and then bg-primary-dark, and flex items-center, justify-center, padding on the x of 4. And then inside here, you're going to have a div with a class name of width-full, max width-md, and then animate-fade-in. And then inside here, you're going to have another div with a class name of flex, and then justify-center, margin bottom of 8. And then inside this div, another div with a class name of flex, and then item-center, then space on the x of 2. And then we're going to show our two icons. So div with a class name of size-8, and then cell-x. Copy this down, copy, change this to O. Now we're going to go below 1, 2, and then this is going to be the player selection. So class create another div with the class name of bg-primary-light, and then rounded-2xl, padding on the x of 6, and then margin bottom of 6, and then shadow-large. And then we're going to have an h2 with a class name of text-primary-silver, text-base, font-bold, margin bottom of 6, text-center, then tracking-wide. And then the text is going to say pick player 1's mark. So you can save that, and you should see that on the screen. Fantastic. Now below the h2, we're going to have another div with a class name of bg-primary-dark, rounded-xl, padding all round of 2, then margin bottom of 4. And then we're going to have another div with a class name of grid, and grid-columns-2, then gap of 2. And then inside this, we're going to have a button, and this button is going to have an on-click, which is going to be calling an inline function, and we're going to say set selected symbol into X, because that is the X button. And then it's going to have some class names here which are dynamic. So curly brackets and then backticks, we're going to give it a height of 16, rounded-large, transition-all, duration-200, and then $sign curly brackets. We want to check if the selected symbol is equal to X, and if that is true, then we want to attach the class name called bg-primary-silver. Otherwise, we want to say bg-transparent, and then on hover, we're going to say bg-primary-light. Now inside this button, we are going to have a div, and this div is going to have some dynamic class names. So $, or they're not $, really, but backticks, it's going to have a class name of size-8, mx auto, and then we're going to check for $sign curly bracket. We want to check if the selected symbol is equal to X, triple equals to X. If this is true, then we want to add the class name of cell X. Otherwise, then it means that we have the cell-x-outline. So, and then that should close that div, and we can save that, so that we have now the X symbol right there. Now we're going to copy out this button, paste it here. Now we are checking for if this is equal to O, and then we want to check for what's the selected symbol. This is equal to O, not 0. What am I typing? That is O. Then this should be cell O, and then this should be cell O outline. And then let's see, button. I think that's all. So that symbol is O. This should say O, and there we go. So that now we can select either of them. So if it is not selected, it shows the outline. If it is selected, it shows the full icon. Now we're going to go below this button and then below two divs. And then inside here, we're going to have a class or rather a paragraph with a class name of text-primary-silver, and then text-small, text-sm, and then text-center, and then with an opacity of 75. And then this is going to say X goes first. So whoever selects the X symbol is going to go first. And then below this paragraph and then below this div, we're going to have our buttons. So whether you can play against the CPU or against another player. So first of all, we're going to have a div with a class name of space on the Y of 4. And then we're going to have two buttons. So the first button here is going to say new game and then versus CPU. Copy this down. This is going to say versus player. Fantastic. Now when you click on the button of the CPU, so on click, we're going to go ahead and call an inline function here that says handle start, and we're going to pass in solo, like so, because it means you're playing a solo player against, or rather a solo game against the CPU. And then on this second button, we're going to have on click, we're going to call the handle start, we're going to pass in multiplayer. So, and if you take a look at the handle start, it takes in the mode, and the mode here, if you check the app.jsx, the mode here is what is going to be passed in, because we are using solo somewhere. I think it was in the GameLogic. So we're checking if the game is solo and then applying some styles and so on and so forth. So we have that. If we save that, you'll notice that we have our buttons right there, but they look ugly. So once again, right here and then right here, hold down the Alt key and then click so that you can add multiple cursors. We're going to give this a class name of with-full bg-primary-orange. Now orange is on the top one, but on the bottom one it's going to be teal, so we're going to change it. And then text-primary-dark, then font-bold, font-bold, then padding on the Y of 4, padding on the X of 6, rounded-2XL, transition-all with a duration of 200, and then transform, and then on hover, we want to scale them up, scale to 105, and then on hover, we can go ahead and say shadow-large, and then text-large, and then tracking-wide. Now let's go ahead and change orange here to teal, and if we save that, then we should have our two buttons. There we go. Look at that. Look at that. So now we can go ahead and test all of this out. So if I play as the X character against a player, then we have to wait for the other player to click. So basically 1v1, and then it should show some text here, right? Win model should show some text if it is a tie. Round tied, is this not getting displayed? Round tied, get winner text. I think on the H2 that I removed probably. Get winner text. Yes, it should show this. Game mode is equal to solo, game status, So let me try something. Let's say round tied. I think we should be able to do that anyways. So round tied. Okay, so it's not showing. It is not showing. If I move this downwards, round tied is right there. I think I just messed up somewhere. I messed up somewhere, but I can't seem to find. I think it was on the H2. I really think it was on the H2. So if I re-add in the H2, let me just quickly add it in. So save that. Okay, round tied. So it was on the H2, but the H2 was displaying something. Next round, if we get X to win, then it was displaying this. That's why I removed it. Text the round. If I disable the h2, what happens? X text around. So the h2 here is on the X. So if I say get winner text, what is this function? Oops. So get winner text, game started round tied, you won or no, you lost. Text around. So text around is this one. Let me try another round where I lose. Or text around. So all text around is displaying. Oh wait, I disabled the h2, right? Oh no, not disabled it. Or did I save it? I didn't save it. Funny. This is quite annoying. But let's say quit, and then let's play a game against the CPU. So if I click on right there, it plays, and then it also plays. And then if I block it here, plays there. If I block it here, plays there, and so on and so forth. Now, one thing that I did notice about playing against the CPU is that I've never won a game. I did not win any game because it blocks me at every attempt. So that's quite annoying. And it is because of our hook right here called useGameLogic, because we're using the minimax right here. So it blocks any attempt of you winning. So probably you can adjust that so that you have a chance at winning. But as of now, I think we are done with the application. Now, if you want to take a look at the code, you can go ahead into the video description. And in the video description, you're going to have the GitHub repo, and then I'm going to attach a link right there. But if you don't find it, you can go into my GitHub repository. My username is TsbSankara, and then the repository is called Tic Tac Toe, like so. But thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel as well if you're not already. And I will see you in the next one.